Hello, YouTube. I'm Vince White. I'm an employment attorney. On this channel, we answer publicly posted questions from YouTube users, getting folks the answers they need from an employment attorney. If I had emotions, if I had the full capability, the full human panorama of emotion, I would be emotionally exhausted. I would go purchase an emotionally exhausted t-shirt from one of my favorite YouTubers. Favorite's a strong term. From a YouTuber I sometimes view. But, lucky for me, I don't, so I won't. Anyways, I digress. On this channel, we answer publicly posted questions from YouTube users, getting folks the answer they need from an employment attorney. But not today. Not today, because we have a question of government overreach. Hopefully not. I mean, maybe not. It's a current events video. The FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, just banned non-compete agreements for kind of everyone, sort of. The Federal Trade Commission just voted 3-2 this Tuesday, so like yesterday, to prohibit non-compete agreements just across the board, essentially. If you don't know what a non-compete agreement is, it's essentially you're working at one job, you sign a contract, you're like, hey, I won't compete with you, job. I won't go into one of your competitors in the same industry and work for them. Usually, in most jurisdictions in the country, they had to be limited in duration, the scope of time that they would last, and often geographic scope as well. Certainly that was the law in New York. It had to be limited in geographic and temporal scope to be effective in New York. And that was true in many jurisdictions in the U.S. to different extents. The real issue was always like, well, what's the duration? And often people would be like, the duration's between 1 and 3 years, depending on where you are in the country. And the geographic scope is often like a couple hundred miles or something like that. But it depends on the industry and the jurisdiction. So this change theoretically is going to go from fast food workers to CEOs, to use the language of the story, which I will link below. Essentially, the FTC has said, like, listen, you can't, employers of the country, you can't make people sign these agreements. And if people did sign them, you've got to go tell those people you're not going to enforce them against them, and so on and so forth. One key difference here, a change that went into effect in this before they voted on it, is senior executives will not, I believe, have their current existing non-competes invalidated. Although the way I read the story, senior executives going forward will not be able to be pushed to sign to sign off on a contractual non-compete in the future, but their current non-competes may remain effective. Now, I think one of the individuals who voted for this change in the law was named Rebecca Slaughter. And I gotta tell you, I don't know much about Miss Slaughter, but that's one hell of a name. And I grew up with G.I. Joes and Sergeant Slaughter, so if I was wearing a hat, I'd take it off to you, Rebecca Slaughter. Listen, I don't like non-compete agreements. I think non-compete agreements are bad for employees. I think they're also bad for the country. They're bad for competition. There's excuse me. There's a number of arguments against non-compete agreements. There's laissez-faire economic arguments. There's utilitarian arguments. There's the state wants to tax people more, so it needs you working arguments. It's just you're hard-pressed to make an argument for non-compete agreements beyond freedom to contract, right? Like, people can enter whatever contractual terms they want, and freedom to contract is important. However, for being honest, employees in this country, because of the way the laws have been shaped over time, they're not on an equal footing when they're entering into employment contracts. So while I'm a big fan of freedom to contract, and people being able to make their own decisions, generally the unequal footing that is created by government intervention and a number of these things creates a disparity of power. So it's not like people are freely entering the non-competes because, listen, we tie a lot of things in this country to employment, right, including medical care, which is insane and just something that flowed from I think like a tax consequence of like a weird tax code issued in the 50s, if I recall correctly. So you need employment. You need employment to keep a roof over your head, to feed your family, to keep medical care. That's a lot of pressure. You're under all that pressure. The average employee is just going to take the job, even if there's non-compete, and they're going to worry about the non-compete later. But if that non-compete means that the employee can't work in their chosen profession, of which they have gained great expertise and experience in that field for a year or multiple years, or they have to move, right? That's a tremendous inefficiency in the market. It's bad for the employee. It's unfair. They might have to work in some other field where they're not really very proficient or knowledgeable. They're not going to earn as much probably, so they're not going to pay as much taxes. They're not going to have as much ability to care for their family. Generally, it's going to degrade quality of life and utility for the entire system. It's just not a good thing. That's how I would phrase the argument against non-competes. But I will say something about the suddenness of this move. These non-compete agreements have been the law of the land for a very, very long time. And people have made businesses and entered into business arrangements based on their belief that they can rely, at least to some extent, on non-compete agreements that people have entered into. And now, potentially, if the FTC's ruling is upheld here, which we will discuss in a moment, but if the FTC's ruling is upheld here, that's all just been swept aside. That's just what you thought was the law of the land. Well, you've got until the Federal Register prints this ruling, and then 120 days after, and that is no longer the law of the land. And so if you build a business that requires the protections of non-compete agreements for some reason, good luck. You are fooled. Like, it's over. Like, I wouldn't want to be you. Lucky for me, I work in an industry. Generally, attorneys cannot be subject to non-compete agreements because there's the real reasons because attorneys write the laws sometimes, or at least advocate heavily for the laws, right, when they don't like them. So that's the real reason attorneys can't generally be held to a non-compete agreement. The reason we say out loud is that clients have the right to choose who they want as their attorney, so there can't be like a non-compete agreement in that sense. Which, okay, whatever legal fiction gets you there, I guess. Listen, I want non-competes to end. No question. Non-competes are bad. Bad for employees, and I am for employees. That's the gig that I have assigned myself, right? Now listen. Can the FTC do this? Let's think about that for a minute. You have a bunch of, I believe, unelected officials at the FTC. I believe they're appointed. So you've got unelected functionaries making sweeping changes to the laws, changing the lives of at least 20% of the employees in this country, and many employers, right? That's kind of wild. That's not how the system is supposed to work. We have people who make laws and who change laws. Those people are the legislative branch. They get elected. I don't think anyone working at the FTC gets elected. Also, is this really within the purview of the FTC? I mean, I guess you could listen. The FTC is supposed to promote competition I guess striking down non-competes is within that purview. Historically, I mean, this is a bit of a change-up for them. Based on my understanding of the prior activities of the FTC, they're usually dealing with things like monopolies, and they only deal with things like monopolies when it's politically expedient, right? Like they're pretty big fans of a lot of monopolies. They really only break up companies that run afoul of the federal government in some way or another, right? Like they're looking at Amazon right now because Jeff Bezos lets the Washington Post write mean things about certain politicians, right? But if we're being honest, that's what's going on. They're like, maybe we got to break up that Amazon. It'd be a real shame if something happened to your empire, Bezos. And he's over there wearing his stupid fucking cowboy hat. Like, you guys want me to stop printing mean things about you? I mean, I'll have a talk with the Post, right? That's kind of my view on how this all runs. But that being said, I don't know if we live in a world where we wait for elected officials to make laws anymore. Had a lot of examples recently where that's not the case anymore. So, is that how things should be? Above my pay grade. Is that something courts will uphold? I don't know. Really depends on which courts you find yourself in. Yeah, your guess is as good as mine, which kind of adds to the whole issue of like, hey, in 120 days after publication in the Federal Register, all those non-competes for our employees are going to be gone. Just hypothetically, there's some employer whose business requires non-competes. And then you call up your attorney like, what are we going to do? And the attorney's like, well, it might not be that bad. That might not actually stick as the law. Oh, okay. That sounds positive. When will we know? I don't know. What do you mean you don't know? Well, it's going to take a case getting in front of a trial court and getting decided and getting appealed and going up the chain, maybe going all the way to the Supreme Court of the United States. Well, how long could that take? I'm an employer. I got to make decisions about my business. Oh, maybe like 2-3 years, if we're lucky. But this is going to go into effect this year. How do I run my business? Can't help you with that. Sorry. You could choose to not comply and risk it and see what happens. That is not a good way to run a country. Non-competes are not a good way to run a business or an economy. But randomly, changing long settled areas of law because maybe it's election season and one party's not doing so well. That's also not a great way to run a country. This is all kind of wild. It's of note that Congress has not explicitly granted the FTC the authority to do this. That doesn't mean as much as you think. Because a lot of the impact of this will have already taken place by the time it gets reviewed by a court. So, 2 takeaways here. 1, super excited. Non-competes might be done forever. That's amazing. That is legitimately an amazing thing. Super happy about that. 2, fuckery unlimited. Just nonsense. You can't trust government. They're being wild, playing games and doing things in nutty fashion. And good luck if you were running a business that legitimately needed non-competes, or you made business decisions that relied upon non-competes. It's really easy to be like, everybody uses non-competes. It's a bad guy. I don't know if that's true. I don't think non-compete should be an option for people going forward, but I do think lots of perfectly reasonable people put together reasonable business plans that relied, at least in part, on non-compete agreements, and there's some level of we shouldn't change the law on a dime, because then people can't plan and lots of people get hurt. And I, frankly, get inconvenienced because I spent today speaking to about 3 reporters about this, and I got to tell you, I just told them everything I told you. I'm pretty sure all 3 of them said, that can't be true. I'm pretty sure you got to be wrong. And I understand why they felt that way. Because it sounds, as I listen to this myself, as I speak, it sounds like I'm an idiot. There's no way this could be as FUBAR as I'm saying it is. But it is. Yeah, listen, I don't know. Sometimes you got to crack a couple heads. Crack a couple eggs? Crack heads, crack eggs? I don't know. Things got to get cracked. People got to get smacked. I guess there's going to be some damage no matter how you do it when you get rid of non-competes. There could have been some kind of phasing out period that got rid of non-competes without stripping people of the protections they contracted for. Would that have been a good idea? Maybe, but it wouldn't have been ideal for employees. So I'm not really seriously advocating for that. I just look at what's going on here and I say, that's not how I would have handled this. Not that anyone's asking. Yay! The end of non-competes. I will be throwing a party. If this was helpful, like, subscribe, comment down below. Share the channel so it can grow. Tell me down below. Tell me what you think about this. Tell me if you agree, disagree. What are your thoughts on the FTC? Can the FTC do this? Can Congress get something passed in time to stop them? Will the courts allow the FTC to do this? Will the courts weigh in? Will this be a done deal by the time the courts even get the question in front of them? Tell me your thoughts. I am at a loss. Not for words. That's pretty rare. I'm pretty talkative. But I'm at a loss for what the rest of the year looks like as this takes place. I'm thinking of certain industries that are just going to get steamrolled by the sudden absence of non-competes. And I guess, big uptick in entrepreneurship. Probably lots of people switching jobs, starting their own businesses, free to do as they please. That's exciting. Entrepreneurship's amazing. Maybe this is how we reinvigorate entrepreneurship in this country, which sounds very important to me. So maybe. Tell me what you think down below. I'm going to link the article down below as well. Take care.